Hey guys, welcome to this training segment on business identity. And this is one of the first things that we like to talk about when we're going through entrepreneurial training. Because what I think a lot of people miss when they decide to launch into business is that there's a perception that other people are going to have about your business, and then there's what you think you're conveying, and sometimes they don't always match. So before we get into all the things about what you're going to do and programming and whatever kind of business model you're engaged in, I think it's really critical to just dial back down into what is my branding message? What am I going to put out there to the world to see? And am I too biased to understand even what they might perceive? And so running it by other people can be important. We always like to test market and kind of focus group things like that. But let's talk about a couple things. First of all, in business identity, I use the word branding because you truly become a brand, whether you think so or not, whether you intend to or not. People will always identify you with something. So it's really important to do 3 or 4 things right off the bat. And if I were you, I would write these down. Number one, it's to kind of personify what that identity is going to be. So I would write down a list of all the things that you bring to the table. What is it that you're planning to do? So it could be things like your biography. What are you good at? What's your education experience? What are you really going to focus on in this business? Just write all that down, even down to unique categories, things like where you're serving a certain population or geography. So write all that down on a big piece of paper. You can put it in narrative form or bullet point form, but get all that down on paper. And then I would start whittling it down into some very key areas. Number one, and we're not going to talk a lot in this segment on actual sales scripting and things like that. That's a little bit more in the one-on-one training that we do with our program owners. But just in terms of your brand identity, focus on one thing and do it well. And I would challenge you right now to think of maybe a particular brand that you're loyal to, whether it's in electronics or food, anything at all, maybe a car, and ask yourself, why do you like that brand? What do they stand for? And I'll bet you would see at least one thing that you might not have thought of before, and that is that they specialize. They're not known for doing everything. For example, I'll give you kind of the antithesis of that. Amazon and Walmart, they don't specialize in one thing, right? They carry everything. They're not a boutique that has one thing, correct? Wrong. They actually do specialize. They specialize in having everything. That's their brand. So you can go, whether it's online shopping or to a store, and get everything you need. You know you're going to get the best prices. I mean, those are guarantees of theirs. Prime, free shipping, next day shipping, those kind of things through Amazon. So even though they're incredibly broad-based companies, they are definitely specializing in something, and that's what gets all of our attention. That's why they have such a market share. So that's why this can be a little tricky in you kind of deciding on what is your brand. So I'm assuming that you're watching this as a fitness or health and nutrition entrepreneur, like in our company, The Diet Doc. All of our programmers around the world have an array of experiences. They have a gigantic difference in educational backgrounds and so forth, but they definitely all come together to do one thing, and that's to help people transform their lives from the inside out. Health, nutrition, physicality, even behavioral issues and so forth that we use with a lot of Corey's information. So that would be the first thing I would want you to do, is sit down, really lay all that out on paper, and decide what is my one thing I'm going to be the best at. And let's say in that same vein that you're thinking of, well, I'm going to do some personal training, I'm going to do some nutrition, I'm going to do this and that, so that's not really one thing. We have to create a message that does point to that one perfect uniqueness that you have that maybe nobody else does. And maybe that's just it. Maybe it's that you combine all those things together and you can handle that kind of perfect triad between nutrition, physical health, and emotional or mental stability and goal setting and mindset techniques and all that. So that's something that, because of our unique curriculum, you can bring to the table and say, I specialize in that. Or if you look at our very specific branding, we say that we are the ones who can bring you the best in science, support, and sustainability. So I can hit on all of those, but they kind of funnel into that last one, which is sustainability. If we're creating the best in science, bringing metabolic physiology to everybody uniquely, their different genetics and so forth, and we're able to fine-tune everything in terms of support, we're going to have the systems in place to do that. That's what leads to sustainability. So if you even look at our rack card that we use and some of the language we use on our website, you'll see that little mantra, science, support, sustainability. So that's what we have focused ourselves down into, and we have about a 2 or 3 sentence mission statement that we use for that. So that's an important thing, and we like to, in our training with new Diet Doc owners, really go through very, very specific scripting practice. It's always a fluid conversation with people. You always want to be very dynamic, and when you're explaining your programming and your business, it's not a sales pitch. Again, those are a lot of things we like to talk about and go into depth with, but for the sake of just branding, work on those things and how unique you're going to be. So a couple of the things I wanted to mention are, if you're going to be in business, and I think this really is any business model in general, you have to focus on solving a problem. And I think this will become a little obvious as I discuss it, but it's something, again, if you don't think about it specifically, you might miss the mark at least a little bit. So a lot of people go into business. I'll give you an example. I'm on Main Street in Evansville. We had a fantastic lady who had a great idea. Our downtown community is growing tremendously. And in the last 10 years, we went from having virtually no residential spaces in our downtown area to having condos and apartments. Just everybody wants to live downtown now. It's the true urban revival. So a lot of people are coming in saying, okay, that's my opportunity. There's that growth. I'm going to go fill a gap. So this one woman that I became friends with started a grocery store, and it was perfect. We've talked about that for 10 or 15 years, even my wife and I. That's something the downtown needs. So she came in, and she thought, well, maybe I won't be able to make as much money as possible there, so maybe I should have some gifts. Maybe I should have kind of a gifty thing and bring some other vendors in. And then she decided to have, one of her vendors was kind of a antique furniture, high-end person. And then as she was trying to fill up her space, she didn't really account for maybe how much capital she would need to do that. And so pretty soon you walked into this massive space, and there are very, very little grocery items, no produce, because she thought, well, that's kind of perishable, that's going to be hard to turn over. So you see this eclectic thing, and within a couple weeks, she was out of business. I mean, just that fast. And so I think she failed at those very first 2 things, which is she forgot her branding message. She went in saying this is a grocery store, a novelty grocery store, and then she steered way off track. And she went in to try and solve a problem, but she didn't. I had friends who went in there, and they would say, man, have you been in that store? Like, there's nothing there. And so those are things that you really need to consider. Everybody says they're the best personal trainer in the world, or they're going to give you the best results. Ad nauseum, you can watch TV and find supplements and programs who say you're going to lose weight with their program. How are you going to do it? How are you going to solve that problem? Because on the back end of that, you're going to have a lot of people who are successful or not successful, and those stories will be told. So you got to make sure you're going in to solve a problem, your brand message dictates that, and then you follow through on that promise. So those are the things I wanted to cover in this segment on business identity. We're going to cover a lot more in this training, this whole training video grouping that we're doing, this 8-week course. So stay tuned. Corey and I are going to kind of flip-flop weeks and talk about different things as it relates to client needs as well as business structure. So glad you joined us, and hope you dig into the blogs as well. A lot of supportive material that we won't have time to cover here in the video. So thanks, and we'll see you again soon.